I mean, everyone kind of knew, like, this is definitely something that's different, that most people hadn't played before.
The first thing I worked on was the Blood Moon expansion for Morrowind. So I was here for the beginning of Oblivion. Yeah, and I remember when I was at Ion Austin, I had initial conversations with Todd Howard about coming here. He would tease me with, like, our next game, giant forests. Because I was like, okay. And that's how he sort of, like, got his hooks in.
You know, just walking around the world, and there were some of the vistas. You'd be just like walking down a path or in the mountains, and I would see some of the new stuff the artists were doing, where they would actually, I think one of my favorite paths was when you go from Coral to Bruma, I guess, when you're taking Martin and Joffrey to Cloudroller Temple. And for a long time that was just sort of a sketched out path through the landscape, and then at some point the world artist went through and they, like, did it for real. And then the next time I went in there, I was like, wow, there's, like, waterfalls and, like, cool rope bridges over chasms, and it felt like I was exploring a real place.
Welcome to a very different Bethesda podcast. I'm Nick Brecken. Today we celebrate the 5th anniversary of the Elder Scrolls IV Oblivion in 2 parts. And if you like what you hear, please send us feedback on Facebook, Twitter, or bethblog@bethsoft.com. Later on in the show, Todd Howard and Pete Hines will talk with Matt and I about their memories of making the 4th Elder Scrolls game. But first, Part 1, a conversation with several key members of the team that worked on the project, beginning with some thoughts on the challenges they faced and the obstacles they overcame to create Oblivion.
It was smaller, obviously.
Senior designer Kurt Coleman.
It was still very tight-knit, quite a bit more, I don't know if chaotic is the right word. We were less organized, a lot more shooting from the hip, a lot more like, hey, I'll just wander over to this person and ask them to change the code. And
Yeah, I mean, Oblivion was just terrifying.
Production director Ashley Cheng.
The game was so monstrously huge, and we kept shoving stuff in. Like, we were still, putting new dungeons and quests in at the last minute. It was pretty insane.
There was one story which I think Todd has told a few times, but I've always liked.
Director of Design Bruce Nesmith.
He was fighting some guy in a house, and the NPC ran out of the house, was gone for a while, so Todd starts to loot the room. The NPC comes back in, wielding this big honking sword, and starts going at him with it. And Todd was like, what the heck happened here? It took about a day to pin it down, but we had some of the code ratcheted up pretty high for AI, and the NPC knew he didn't have a weapon, so he went and found a weapon in the house next door, ran out of the building, ran next door, stole the sword, came back into his own house, and then attacked him. So that was a memorable moment because we didn't realize exactly how good Radiant AI could be. It was one of those moments where it was probably just a little too good and we needed to dial it back a little bit. We're big believers in iteration. And as a result, what happens is we'll try things that sound outrageous and sound too far out there, and then we'll see how they affect the game. And sometimes you can keep them close to what you tried them. Many times you look at them and go, yeah, that was really a bad idea. We need to not do that anymore. And then every now and then you get those little golden nuggets where it's like, oh, I didn't realize it would do that. And you take a piece of it, and that becomes a part of the game because that's something that we didn't realize, hey, that would work really well like that.
And though additions can improve a game, so can subtractions, as senior designer Emo Pagliarulo painfully discovered.
Yeah, the arena was, one of the things, I don't know if people know this, but one of the things we really struggled on in Oblivion is, fitting all the audio assets on the disc. And we had too much dialogue. And the arena that's in the game, that's in Oblivion, is in the Imperial City. At one point, there was an arena in every city. So, and I had already done the work. I had written the dialogue and everything, and we had gotten to a point where we really needed to cut back on dialogue, and so I ended up cutting out all the other arenas in the other cities, and that included 800 lines of specifically written dialogue. Just gone, done, bye. You know what I mean? So that was painful. But it was actually the right choice because I think, having one arena in the game was much more manageable and much more fun from a player standpoint, too. So I think it's one of those things where a crappy situation led to a better game, But it was definitely painful when it happened, though, yeah. Dark Brotherhood was cool because I took a different approach. Like, I didn't know a lot about the Elder Scrolls lore. So I took a step back from it, and I grew up a good Catholic boy in Boston. So if you look at the fiction of the Dark Brotherhood that's in Oblivion, it's actually a sort of like dark perverted version of the Catholic Church. There's the Sithis is God and the Night Mother is Mary, and I just sort of took those experiences and sort of flipped them around. I wanted to have it. I wanted it to have a certain tone, like a very sort of. I didn't want the player to be that grisly in what he did. So like the tone is more like it's very sort of darkly comedic, and the player, if you do the Dark Brotherhood, the player is guilty by association. Like I was able to the other people who are in the Dark Brotherhood with you, your other family members are they're like the psychotic. Like there's the one guy who talks about killing a little girl at her birthday party, and there's everybody else is way more evil than you, but you feel guilty by association just by hanging around them. And in a game like Oblivion, where you kill hundreds of people through the course of the game, what makes it special about being an assassin? You know what I mean? Big deal, I can kill people. So that's why I try to work in some of the novelty, dropping the head on the guy, and the other thing I try to do is that in coming off of Thief, which is a game all about stealth and sneaking, so it was like, how could I get some of that into Oblivion? Some of that, how to try to capture a little bit of the charm of the Thief games. It occurred to me, I'm like, shortly after the game is released, the mod community is going to do what they will. And sure enough, there's a complete Thief plugin with all of Garrett's tools from Thief, you know what I mean? Water arrows and moss arrows and the blackjack and all this stuff. So I sort of knew that was going to... I was like, this is going to happen anyway. In a way, it was the type of game that I had always wanted to make. I had always, even doing the Thief stuff, I wanted to do more role-play stuff. And, because I've been a fan of, Daggerfall and Arena forever, and so that was really fun to do that.
I'm pretty fond of the Umbacano quest. I think it represents some of the things that we wanted to carry forward into future games, both in terms of pacing and connectivity, making things feel organic in the world, and in terms of how the feel of the final encounter was. Back in those Wild West days, sometimes the final encounter was you put a guy down in the world and he's just really tough and you have to beat him. Well, here we actually made an actual encounter that you had to deal with that felt like it was more like a boss encounter. So I'm particularly fond of that. And when I talk about the natural world stuff with the Umbacano quest, you find something in the world, the quest is waiting for that. And when you find that, somebody comes and talks to you. So it feels like the world is natural, and that's a very cool moment.
In Shivering Isles, the battle, I think it's in Cylon, between the Oriels and the Dark Seducers, and how you can play it more than one way. You can go one side or the other. That's the kind of thing that I like to do. We didn't have, we could only do it in a few places in Oblivion, just based on the amount of time we had and the amount of content we had to make. So that was sort of fun to really get into all the different ways to set something like that up. Even something as this is art related, but it was one of the cooler things I think in Shivering Isles at the very beginning, when the room around you explodes into butterflies. Yeah. That's based on our effects artist having figured out all the different tricks you can pull in the engine and sort of going pulling out all the stops on that one. Knights of the Nine was more of I liked that one a lot. It was done really fast with a very few people. And I think it doesn't really show that. I think for the feel of it and how it has really good tone. It's like it gives you the feel of being a crusading knight. That was fun. I mean, it was short, and it was sort of, kind of fun because it was a really small team, which is not usually, we're used to working in the giant team on a giant project, and so this was a very different type of experience for Bethesda. Here, it's like, here's a thing we're going to do, and we have this amount of time, and here's the resources. Do something cool. What can you come up with? And I thought everyone involved in that project did a really good job.
While the developers were experimenting with new technology and design techniques, audio director Mark Lampert was getting his first taste of working with celebrity voice actors.
For me, it was kind of surreal because I wasn't there at those sessions. Todd Howard was at, he went to England and worked with Patrick Stewart. He met him face to face and got to be with him in the studio that day. And with Sean Bean, it was actually over the phone. So it was me and Kurt Kuhlman and I believe Todd Howard around the speakerphone. But you recognize the voice when you hear him.
If all this is part of a divine plan, I'm not sure I want to have anything to do with it.
There's usually a little bit of downtime right before the session starts, and you dial into this phone patch number. And they'll be like, Sean will be here in just a moment. And then you hear some kind of clatter as they show him into the studio and everything, and you hear that voice, and you know that guy's voice. And so it's almost like, I'll believe you if you say that's him, because it sounds just like him. And I'll believe that this is him that we're directing, but it is surreal to me to not see the face of the person you're talking to, and have it be this person that you've seen in all sorts of movies before, or heard them speak for one reason or another in interviews. Thankfully, we've gotten to go, or at least I've gotten to meet people more face to face since then, and it's a little easier to direct people that way. I think it puts them a little more at ease too. When I think of it, like in Sean Bean's case, having done this game and spoken for this character and never even saw us. We were over the phone saying, "Hey, we're in Washington, D.C. How's the weather?" That's strange.
The E3 demo of 2005 is burned into the minds of team members more than any one moment in the development of Oblivion. The demo would be the first time the world would get a look at the game, and required the involvement of nearly every department of the studio. Complicating things, the demonstration was drastically altered with only days to spare.
What I remember from it was a ridiculous amount of work for everyone. And there were last-minute changes that were caused a lot of trouble, but were well worth doing. And all of that happened within a very short amount of time.
I'm not sure my memory is quite accurate. I think that it was like literally the weekend before it had to be done. Like it was being, the discs and machines were leaving on like Wednesday. And this was on a Friday night when Todd was like, "Hey, Kurt, come over here. Istvan's done this cool thing. You got to see this. This is what the demo is going to be." This is when, and I thought, it's Friday night. We've got a few days yet. Things are looking good. It's pretty much close to polished. And then we scrapped that whole thing and started fresh with just 3 or 4. That was probably a good month's work. Not solid month, obviously, because I was doing other things, but I'd work on it, polish it, iterate on it as we went along. So that was.
Did you think you were actually going to make it?
I don't know. And I was asking Todd after we published that, like, how do you remember that? I remember sort of storming out of the office cursing, but I don't remember obviously I came back, but I don't really remember if anyone thought geez, I wonder if Kurt's coming back.
It was actually fun in a way. Even when it got to be consecutive late nights in a row and everyone working 7 days as we were. But it was fun in the sense of, at first it wears me out when you start staying late because everything is becoming more work at that time. You're used to working 5 days a week, let's say 8-9 hours a day like normal people do, and then you're ramping up. And so it feels like it's too much to deal with at first until you get into that groove and everyone else is working late too, and then it switches from grind to camaraderie, to where when it all starts coming together, when the demo really starts looking good, to me it justifies any of the trouble that came before that.
There's a wonderful little video moment that the videographers captured, which really tells the tale for me. We had the couch set up right in the middle of the design area. By design area, I mean the team area, actually, not literally the game design area. In the middle of the team area, with a projection screen, and Tim Lamb, who at that point was in QA, was running the demo over and over and over, looking for bugs, looking for polish, verifying he could run it 10 times in a row without it crashing, things like that. And so the videographers put a camera way up high in the ceiling pointed down at him, and they ran an entire day. And in the entire day, Tim never moved, just his thumbs. And people are racing around back and forth in that sort of quick time motion, and they encapsulated it down to about a 60-second thing. He's just sitting there constantly playing the game, and there's all this frantic activity going on around him. And that's kind of how it was, too. There was this incredible focus on the demo, but at the same time, if you weren't intimately involved in it, there was all kinds of other stuff that still had to be done. And sometimes those dual needs collided, and sometimes they meshed well.
The demo is also the beginning of the crunch. We started crunching for the demo, working long hours, and then it just never went away. We kept going, and it kept going until we finished the game like a year later. So that was pretty rough.
I mean, I think there was a lot of things that we learned from that. I mean, that's one of the reasons why we've gotten better at it, and we didn't have anything like that in Fallout, and I don't think, Todd has basically said that we're never doing that kind of a crunch again, and the whole point is to plan better. Now, there's a lot of things about that project that, contributed, like we were going on a brand new platform that the specs were, changing right up until sort of the last minute as far as we were concerned, which is, I guess, one of the main reasons why we were not a launch title, because I think that original date was to come out as a launch title.
The 360 launch was insane because essentially up until the last few months of the project, the 360 was basically a massive, like it was just a box. We didn't get final hardware till very, very late in the process. So I think we tried compiling it a couple of times and went, yeah, this the game's not going to run on this thing, so we need to... We had a happy hour when they decided to double the RAM, and that was a big help. The game, Oblivion is such a memory hog that the game is basically constantly running on that edge. So it pushes the hardware pretty far, and the fact that we were able to move it, it was delayed to the spring, basically allowed us to essentially finish the game.
When I start getting worried about the amount of work left to do, or the things that I see that still need to be changed or fixed in some way to really make it feel final, I always try to think back. I try to think back to, how did I feel at this time during Fallout 3, this far out from ship? And then how did I feel at this time on Oblivion? And I can't remember it. I don't think I remember it clearly anyway, because I always think, I was less concerned, or it felt less panicky, and that can't be true, because at the time you have nothing else to compare it to, so everything feels panicked and rushed, and in the sense of, like, if I don't do this now, there won't be time to fix it, and then we're going to ship the game, and I won't be able to stand listening to it, because all I'll hear are the mistakes that I should have made, and why didn't I fix them when I had the time to fix them? It would have taken me 5 minutes. So I gotta think it's kind of the same. I think we're better off schedule-wise. We have much more time right now, even with the work there is to do, to keep playing the game and change all the things that are annoying, and have enough time to play it long enough to where you can get a real feel for, if you play this in the first 5 hours, everything's fine. If you play it for 15 hours, this balance is off right here. If I play it for 30 hours, I can't stand hearing this sound one more time. I need more variations in there, or I need to change it up. So having all that time to do more playthroughs, more iterations is going to be just critical. And I don't know, we've got to be better off than we were before. Even if the game is as much bigger as it is and more complex than it is.
Having worked at a couple different studios, and the people who work Bethesda who haven't worked other places, I don't think they realize how well managed we are and how well we've worked out the process of making games. Because in a lot of places, it's not. It's really your seat of the pants trying to figure it all out. And I think we have it nailed down pretty well now.
I actually think we're very, Skyrim is probably the smoothest running project I've ever been involved in here. So that's been good. It seems like we finally caught our processes up to the size of the team and the size of the game that we're making. And also we have Windows now.
For the people who aren't familiar with our studio, we for the longest time were in the basement of the building, and that has its own vibe. You know what I mean? It's very dark and it's very, you become more withdrawn, I think, and it's like you're in your little cube, and some people put even bookshelves up and curtains, and they're blocking themselves in this little pit of darkness,
I mean, to me, at least, it's a pretty big deal that we're not in a dark basement. We were there for, I don't know how many years. It was long enough.
Does that make some of your quest lines a little less dark?
I don't think so. I don't know if I've noticed that, but it's more fun to work, and especially in long hours. In the old days, you would come out and you'd go in, and it was dark, and you'd come out, and it was dark, and you're like, I wonder what the day was like.
I will say that near the end, it was pretty exciting because to wrap up all the masters and the builds and getting it all done, I remember the final weeks. That was one of the first, it felt really good when that game finally wrapped up, and I just remember, kind of standing at my desk and getting the reports and just kind of, telling everybody, okay, we're done. I'm extremely lucky because I am literally the first one who finds out that we're done. So, I mean, even before Todd Howard knows, I know. And so I get to go and tell him, hey, we're done. And so that's pretty exciting. And Oblivion, for me, that was the first project I had basically worked on from beginning to end. And so that I was especially proud of that one. I will say finishing games are awesome, and it's especially awesome for me because we only do it once every 4 years. So I'm literally counting these are the number of games I'll be able to do before I die. So when we finish a game, it's a really big special occasion. So the best part is when the game started becoming playable, you can get into the game and play it, and people would just play it nonstop. It was it was pretty exciting being able to see just how beautiful the game was, all the quests come together, a lot of the wacky AI scripting came together near the end, and that was pretty cool to be able to see some of that work. Even after the game came out, I would go home and play it, and you would see everyone that's in the studio was everyone's playing Oblivion because it's huge and it was fun, and we definitely made a game that we ourselves would have wanted to play, and it was pretty awesome.
I don't think I ever played it at home. I think my copies, any copies we got after shipping, I think I gave them away to friends and stuff like that. And I really didn't play Fallout either. It's hard for me to do it. I think if I waited 6 months to a year and then played it, I could kind of divorce myself from knowing how you've already seen the sausage being made. Now I don't want the sausage anymore. So that's kind of a good description of it for me.
I played the game 300 hours, maybe, just in the course of developing it. I didn't want to see it again after a while. I was able to come back to it after it sat for a bit, but I couldn't play it anymore. I just couldn't play it because I'd spent 300 hours. So there was nothing fresh. There was nothing new. Not only did I know every little corner of the game, I knew how it had gotten to be that little corner of the game because I saw it broken, fixed, changed, altered, improved, done. And I played it through all those stages. So by the time it was done, it's like, and do what? What am I going to get from it? There's nothing left. Then we moved on to Shivering Isles. By the time that was done, some of that had worn off, and I've actually gone back and played it just for the enjoyment of it. But it took a while. It took a while to get to that point.
However, if any time I know there was a time in Oblivion I needed to jump in and create a new character and play it for some reason. Maybe I think it might have been because we were working on DLC or something. And you can't help but get sucked back into it again. So you say to yourself, I'm just going to go play for 5 minutes. Okay, I need to create this character and jump into the game and go test this one thing. And once you do it, you have limitless possibilities in every direction that you look. And I do it now. I'll go into the game to test one little thing to make sure the sound got hooked up correctly. And 20, 30 minutes just gets wasted. Not wasted because I'm enjoying it, but wasted in terms of work time. It's like, okay, that sound worked, everything's fine. Let me just go wander over here a moment. And then you just get, let me follow this path. I'll just go clear out this one dungeon. And it happens, you're on the same track as the fans are on when they play the game. And it's the same reason people play it for 150, 200 hours. Because you're given every choice in the world. Wander in any direction, go do whatever you want. So you can't help but pick up that thread and then just follow it and see where it goes.
You know, my kids have been my kids are like, my youngest is are 7 and my oldest is 11, and they played around with Oblivion before, but really just messing with the editor and cheating. And this is the first time my son has actually played Oblivion as a game, and it holds up because it's, first of all, an open world first person game is still to this day a rarity. You know what I mean? And the fact that the way all the different parts of Oblivion intersect with one another. Like the example, my son was playing specifically, he completed, all he wanted to do, he got the Fighter Stronghold DLC, right? So all he wanted to do was hook up his castle, right? So he needed money. So he was trying to make money. So he went through the arena, and became Grand Champion of the arena and all that money, which was great because he didn't know that I had designed that. And so when I told him, that was really cool. Like, it's like, oh, no way. Like, and he's like, did you make up this guy? I'm like, yeah. He's like, did you do this? I'm like, yeah. But so he's doing the arena, and so he gets the adoring fan from beating the arena. So he's got the adoring fan, and then he's doing quests, and the adoring fan is following him, and the adoring fan is having these conversations with all these people, and then he's joining these other quest lines. So it's to see this intersection of all these different parts, and they all work, and it's a type of systemic gameplay and sort of like random emergent stuff that just works, you know what I mean? And it's crazy, and it's like, and it's so fun because you never know what's going to happen. And to watch him play it, it was just hilarious to actually see him play the game. It's like, you know what, this really does hold up after all these years. Like, you forget how long it's been. It's like, and it made me want to play it again. It's like there's a lot of good stuff in here. And not a lot of games can do that, we joke about how hard it is to make open world games, but to make an open world game with all these different systems and different aspects that fit together so well is even more rare. And that's what impressed me watching him play after all this time. I feel like that was entirely boring, actually.
No. That was good stuff.
You keep that in. Oh.
Yeah, you're right.
that was nothing funny. No funny anecdotes. And then there was the time where I took off my pants and I said, "Here's my Dark Brotherhood dagger." Like,
He is still recording.
So
there you go. That's the Easter egg.
That's my Dark Brotherhood longsword. That's what I meant to say.
Okay, welcome to another Bethesda podcast, a very special Bethesda podcast. We've got Pete Hines.
Is this the one where Todd gets hooked on speed and we have to talk him down? He's taking You never. I guess Family
Oh,
Ties.
you're
is
doing that.
probably-
You're doing the after school special.
That's a very
joke?
special Family Ties. Remember Michael Keaton and his friend Speed, and then he
It's
died?
not Michael Keaton. It's Michael J. Fox.
Michael J. Fox.
Yeah.
That's a good one. So yeah, we're here. We're here with you probably recognize both voices. That's Pete Hines, our VP of Marketing and PR, and Todd Howard, Game Director of Bethesda Game Studios. How are you guys doing?
I'm excellent. I can't speak for Pete.
I'm doing well. Thank you.
Okay.
Well, we're here to mark the 5th anniversary of Oblivion, which was March 20th, I believe. And we just thought we'd, sit down and talk about the game. It's been 5 years. And, what sticks out in your guys' mind when you think about Oblivion now?
Well, first, when I saw internally that it had been 5 years, I thought it was much longer.
So I had the same thought.
It feels like it was 10 years ago, honestly. So that was my first reaction, and I guess that I don't know what to attribute that to. That it felt like it was so long ago. Maybe because there's so much stuff in the game and things that people have done with it and the fans have done with it. But also, I think when we make a game, it's very long making the game. So maybe my mind went back to when we started it, which was about 10 years ago.
Right.
It was 2002. So maybe that's what it was. That was my first reaction to hearing that. The memories of the development, I have two big ones, which are when I pitched the game internally. It was right after Morrowind. Morrowind had done much better than our internal expectations for it. And it really had, it was showing like it was, selling really well. People liked it at a very good rate, not just, at first and then dropped off. And everybody would assume that you would do a sequel to, all right, this was a big success. We'd like a sequel in 2 years. That's the playbook. And I was like, yeah, but what if we took twice as long as, we took 4 years and made this really bigger, crazier thing for the next console cycle, which we don't know what it looks like yet. The fact that I sold that, that I got, okay, is still a little bit amazing. And we made some guesses as to what those consoles would look like.
Because you didn't really have any
White
idea at that point,
with a
right?
hard drive on top.
We had no idea, but you could make guesses based on general hardware cycle memory. I think generally goes up 8 times. There's certain things it'll have a hard drive. It'll use these types of pixel shaders. We made some relatively good guesses.
I actually remember when you and I went out to Microsoft to show a bunch of people at Microsoft, like a super secret thing, and we showed them Oblivion for the first time. And again, this is before 360 had been announced or confirmed or anything, and Todd sort of presenting the game and like, well, here's all of our assumptions. And even then, like, they wouldn't say, well, like, yes, that's correct. They would just sort of give us vague, like, well, you're on the right path
Blink
in terms
twice
of where
if there's
you're.
a hard
Yeah,
drive.
like it was. Even then, it was sort of like, showing it to the people who were making the thing, and they at that time couldn't even tell.
It was like
Todd,
meeting government agents who have seen aliens but are not allowed to accurately describe them.
Something like that.
Wow.
But we're really into chitin armor, as I recall. Like,
yeah, they had very specific.
yeah, like they really, there was a couple of really big like Morrowind fans in the room, so they both had deep knowledge of what we were doing and deep knowledge of what they were doing, but they would only share half of that with us, and it wasn't the half we really needed. So
E3 is a big memory. We can
Yep.
talk about that later. But mostly Oblivion for me, is colored by not knowing if it was ever going to work. Because we knew we wanted to go on these consoles, and by the time we got the final hardware, we were doing a lot of crazy stuff. And it really wasn't until late in the game that they added the extra memory. It was 256 megs of RAM for a long time in the 360. And I know that we and Epic, a bunch of developers, were kind of banging on Microsoft that you really need 512, or the games are not going to have the resolution that you think they're going to have on the screen. And this is the feature we need most. Microsoft's comeback was the feature you need most is install base. And that was their number one. So if they need to do X, Y, and Z to have that happen.
Right.
And I remember when they told us they were upping it to 512, we literally had a party. We had the 512.
We had a 512 party.
With 512 party.
Nice.
Like cakes with memory sticks or something.
I think it was very quick. No, it was just beer.
Just beer.
Yeah.
Just straight up beer.
And it was the happiest that I've seen some people here ever. Mostly programmers.
Yeah. Scott Frankie programmers.
Yeah.
I was curious as you were talking. I was just wondering, was there ever a point when Oblivion? It seems like this, the title that makes sense for the game. Did you ever have another title you were floating around for?
Never. No,
Never.
that was the title from when we started Morrowind. Oblivion, the plane of existence, is actually named for a line in Excalibur, where I think it's Merlin in the beginning says, "I cast your soul into oblivion." I forget. I think that's a tidbit nobody knows.
You were talking about E3, the presentation.
That was an interesting year for us because we did Oblivion. We had a booth, but Oblivion wasn't in the booth. We had Oblivion sequestered off in a separate little room at the end of the hallway because we wanted to do a mini theater. And so the combination of that and showing Oblivion in that room, and then doing all this stuff with Microsoft, and I remember that being like a hugely stressful big deal, like getting all this stuff together for them to show it on stage. But
Right, because that was their press conference, right?
right for their press conference. But the thing I remember most about that E3 was the very first day of the show, the power went out in sections of the convention center, which just happened to include the air conditioning for our room. Not the power, just the air conditioning. And so we were running the game that time off of a PC, and we had fans in the room, but we, instead of cooling the audience, we had them all blowing into the PC because we were so worried about
It did overheat a bunch
about
of
it
times.
overheating. Yeah,
And then we realized we need to point the fans at the machine.
yeah. But I mean, that room got gamey, to say the least. I mean, we were jamming 20, 30 people into a very small little theater, and it was constant. And they loved it. I remember talking to, I'd sit in the back for some of them or wait outside when it got too hot for them to come out, and people were, aghast in terms of looking at next gen tech and like, holy crap, I can't believe it. But that was
a pretty long demo too.
It was.
And at that time, a lot of the systems, while they were running, they weren't running it fast enough. So I remember spending a lot of time before E3. We were just optimizing things. And we were doing all this procedural content, particularly with the forest. So the forest scene, sometimes we'd run the demo, would run great. And sometimes we'd run the demo, and it would run like shit. And we had testers looking at this. We could not figure out why. Let's try it on different machines. 'Cause, that's one big pain about PC development is, do you have your right drivers installed? Like, do you have an iOmega device with this printer drive? Like, the amount of headaches you get optimizing on the PC. And finally, one of the guys testing it noticed the grass looked different when it ran slower, or certain things visually looked different. And then we realized it was generating. Sometimes when you ran it, it generated more stuff of particular things, grass, trees, that made it slower. And once we figured that out, we were good. But the amount of time it took to figure out that particular problem.
Actually, my second most vivid memory of that E3 was as we were working on the demo and iterating on it, we liked it, but I remember we just kept feeling like the end of it just wasn't what we wanted. We were trying to do like this big battle at the end and a gate and all this stuff.
This was Kvetch, right?
Yeah. Well, no, at the time it wasn't.
It wasn't.
The original one, like, it was in a field somewhere or running up a hill.
It's around when you play the final game. I think it's Fort Such. It was outside of that.
Okay.
And I remember having a conversation with Todd, and I think we were talking about it at lunch one time, and like, can we not do something that's more like this or more? I don't even remember what the example was I used. And I think Todd went to, was it to Kurt, to Istvan, to somebody?
Well, first I went to the artist. I don't know if it was Istvan or Rafael Vargas, who had been making Kvetch, and they had recently made a lot of progress on it where it looked pretty cool, and if you set it on fire, it had the right vibe. And and one of them was at lunch with us.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you think we could do the end of the demo there? And he mocked something up pretty quick, just as a space, and I loved it. And I went to Kurt, who was in charge of the thing. We were pretty much done. It was like on a Friday, late on a Friday, like we're done. Like, hey, would you mind redoing the ending? He did not give me a positive reaction.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Though, unfortunately for him, I'm very used to that reaction. It does not dissuade me ever
From doing it anyway.
Well, how about we do it anyway?
But I remember that Monday coming in, and you were like, "Hey, come take a look at this," and it was dramatically better, and in a really short period of time, really late in the game.
Yeah, and we do, when it comes to demos, whether it was Oblivion, Fallout, now Skyrim, they're really tricky to do for our games because we're trying to pack a lot of features into a amount of time that somebody at E3 can actually sit there and watch. When a journalist comes to our office, they're going to spend all day. It's infinitely easier. So we did put a lot of time into that to try to how can we get as many features on the screen in the time we have.
I remember that being a big plot point of the documentary that
I
watched
they
probably
were
in my college dorm room at the time.
That's because that's the time they were here. That just happens to be what we were doing at the time.
I thought that was a good hook. Like, what do you guys go through in getting ready for this big show and showing your game for the first time? And so they were here, adding to Todd's stress level tremendously, because it wasn't just they'd pop into a meeting every now and then. Like, they were constantly in our office during a really stressful time.
Shaking his head.
Todd's giving his very annoyed shaking of the head look. But, like, not just being there, but then, like, Todd would say something in a meeting, but the camera guy hadn't been on him, so they would ask Todd to say it again. And it was his blood pressure was already in the red,
God.
and so it was not helping. It made for a good documentary, but Todd was like, "We will never do that."
Once it was a great experience that I declared never again afterwards. I eventually got used to it, the camera following me around, and then they put a lot of that stuff in the documentary, and someone above us had that cut out. We don't.
Right. Not good. Not for public viewing. And so we ended up. So there's actually two versions of the documentary. There's the original version,
the director's cut,
which is actually really good and highly entertaining, but also very different in vibe than the one we.
The original one has more of the vibe of, and it is really good, but it has the vibe of this is never going to work. And it has a lot more drama because you start thinking. Even when I watched that version, I'm like, wait, did it not work?
Oh, man. So, speaking of the making of, obviously we did a collector's edition for the game. At that point, that was pretty rare for a console game to have a
Halo 2.
There's Halo 2, but there weren't a whole lot.
There weren't a lot. That's true. But we had done one for Morrowind that was
Yep.
pretty successful and pretty popular. And it was another one of those things where I think we had sorted out really early on. And most of this goes to Todd because generally speaking, he usually says, like, here's the things I want to do in my collector's edition. But we had figured out, like, the coin, the pocket guide to the Empire, all of that stuff. We had
Always a good bathroom read.
We had figured out a lot of that stuff, very, very early on.
Have you put that to the test, Matt?
Yeah.
No, it's my
All right.
experience.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. It's in there.
Yeah, we really like in our collector's editions that the stuff feels like it's from the actual world.
Yeah.
So I really like the coin, and Pete gave me a bag, like a felt purse.
It was
actually a Crown
Royal bag,
but it's full of septums of the gold coins. I mean, it's got maybe 100 in it.
Yeah, it was.
And I tell you what, to a person, and it's in my office. When you pick it up, there's this little tinge of like, this is what people like. I don't know. It makes you
feels
happy.
like an in-game
you wanna
thing.
You want to like juggle it in your hands. And
Indiana Jones woman put it on the idol.
People have done that, yeah.
So after 4 years, what was it like actually seeing the game release and get the reaction that it did?
The most stressful thing, because we were done and we were feeling pretty good about the game, that we had accomplished it, and we're a little bit anxious about everybody going to play it. And then I remember GameSpot did this. They announced they were going to do basically a stunt with it, and at midnight on the night the
game came
first
out, yeah.
came out, they were going to play Oblivion for 12 hours and live stream it.
I remember that.
All right.
And we pretty much shit ourselves. Like, oh my God.
I actually remember
Oh my
you
God,
and I.
so-
You and I were we had our party that night. We had our launch party that night, and we were on the
watched
boat.
It. We came back and watched it live.
But we were on the boat thinking like talking about like, oh crap, like in an
We had a
hour,
countdown to
GameSpot
it,
is
yeah.
going to start playing our game live in front of anybody in the world who wants to watch it. Like, what have we done? What?
You know, if there's any piece of software, there's going to be a bug, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, but you run this risk of the first person to pop it in is going to play it for 12 hours, and any little thing that goes
Yeah.
wrong.
By the way, it wasn't an hour. It was
12.
12 hours.
And they're
straight.
just going to say everything they're thinking. So,
Right.
fortunately, they loved it, and there were nothing horrible happened when they ran it. So it came out well. But we all went back and watched it, and we're just,
Did you watch the whole 12 hours?
no.
No.
But we watched. They were still
would
going
be
the
our
next
job now.
morning,
Yep.
so we probably watched 3-4 hours of it.
I kind of want to find that now and just go back and
Nothing could
Gotta relive
Nothing
the-
could recreate the nerve wrackingness that idea had.
So it sounds like we won't do that again.
Well, it's not up to us, right?
Right.
The game's out. Someone could.
Right, that's a good
now
point.
it's,
What
now
happens-
it's Ustream. Now it's
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
that's
what happens
true.
now
Yeah,
is someone
YouTube
gets a
used to
pirated
be-
copy,
yeah.
and they put it up even before the game is out.
right.
Yeah, I have memories of that too. Moving on.
We'll be going over that in 2 years.
Yeah. So I read in an interview with you recently how you always go back and play the Elder Scrolls games when you're preparing a new one. So what stands out about the game now when you're playing it?
It's very, very hard to put down. I think we did a really good job of putting the carrot out there at every point and distracting you with stuff. So even if I go in, because I'll go back, I'll just play it to play it, just see what sticks out, see what's fun. But then even now, I will go back and see how I'll forget how we solved a certain problem that maybe we're having now in Skyrim. I'm like, oh, I just want to verify what we did to solve this problem before. And to me, it's like I go in for 5 minutes, 10 minutes, and check, and then I'm done. And I can't put it down. I just start playing, and it's 2 hours later. I'm like, uh-oh, I better get back to work.
Yeah, I mean, the thing that stands out to me whenever I think of Oblivion is like that first shot coming out of the sewer and just seeing that draw distance and being like, holy crap, like this is on a console. How late into the release did you even have a 360 to play with? Like, was that a...
We had dev kits throughout 2005.
Okay.
But a real one
Like a real one,
that
yeah.
really worked was probably September.
Okay. And it was...
Oh,
Well, and like final.
Right.
Because that was the big thing. It's always moving, that you code a certain way based on what the hardware does, and then you find out 2 weeks later, well, we had to tweak the hardware the way it handles that, and now it does this. And the programmers would be like,
The other thing we did, so you could take a scene and you had the ability to test the render before that, but with what we do, we're doing a lot of stream. We're using every system pretty heavily. So when it comes to even the actual real speed of the DVD drive and the actual speed of the hard drive, and there are actually different DVD manufacturers.
Right.
And the stuff that you literally put, the data you put on the outside of the disk is moving faster, so you can load stuff on the outer ring of the disk exponentially faster than you can load things on the inside of the disk, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So just in a game like Oblivion, where we're streaming this much and doing all those things, literally moving a piece of data further out on the physical disk would make parts of the game work. So needing the final box and seeing all of that, we had to have it. And even at that time, we were still, because we're dealing with unknowns, still holding out this hope that we would make the 360 launch. And there were parts of the game that looked like, yeah, we're making it. And then there were other parts of the game that looked like, no chance. And the fact that a game that size came out 4 months after the launch is pretty, I think it's pretty good.
remarkable.
Yeah. One of the things I was actually playing Oblivion last night, going through some of the favorite areas I didn't remember some of the names. A Brush with Death was always the memory that comes to me first, because it's like it was the first side quest I ever did, and I was like, oh wow, here I am in this. Here's a painting. I'll click on it. Oh, now I'm in this new world. Pretty cool. And I also went back to the end of the game, the big battle between Martin and Dagon, and I couldn't help but think, oh wow, we've got this big dragon. Did that have any influence on putting dragons in Skyrim?
Yeah, absolutely, it did. And the dragons are also something everybody always asks us about, and we've always wanted to have. But that visually, I think, was the first inkling, because I think for the time in Oblivion, that looks pretty cool on the screen.
It's pretty epic, huge.
Yeah.
And once you saw that, it was like, even though you think dragons are a cliche in fantasy, when one really drops in front of you, it's pretty impactful.
Yeah.
So, yeah, definitely. Brush with Death was a really, really cool quest that Al Nanes put together. And it was one of the things that came up. We had a big, big brainstorming session. Just put on a huge whiteboard every miscellaneous quest idea. And that one definitely is one of my favorites. I think it's good to have a few where, it opens up and you're like, you got to be kidding me.
I love just looking at the skybox on that, just because it looks perfect like a painting.
Mm-hmm.
Is there anything that you guys wanted to do in Oblivion that now you're doing in Skyrim, that like ideas that you had and kind of didn't, maybe have enough time? Or
The big thing is how the AI probably manifests itself on the screen. We were really pushing just having the people move around in Oblivion with the AI. Like, now they're going to sleep, now they're eating. Because it's really coming off more when everybody just stands where they are. But we never quite, it didn't seem believable enough when you go back and look at Oblivion. We had wanted to, we need a lot more animations, we need this. So coming into Skyrim, that was a big priority. You can take all the other little stuff, graphics, things like that, people's faces, women who don't look like they've been beaten with potatoes. Can you be beaten with a potato? That's actually how they look, though. If you were to say someone's been beaten by a potato, they look like a woman in Oblivion.
By the way, it might amuse you to know that really pisses Matt Hooper off. Like, how is it that Todd's games get all these awards and he has really ugly women? Like, the fact that he has ugly women doesn't come back to bite him in the ass at all. His games are still awesome. It's just totally not fair.
Right.
We were talking about attractive women and like all the whistles we were getting during the raids demo of good-looking women, and how I was talking about how Skyrim now has really attractive women, but it really cheesed Matt off.
I don't know that we've completely
It's what's on the inside.
I don't know that we've completely gotten a pass on that. I mean, most people complain about it, so.
Well. So since Oblivion came out, how have things changed with the company?
I mean, the company overall has grown a lot. If you include, Bethesda, ZeniMax, all the studios we have now. At that time, we were pretty much the only development studio, so there's a lot of pressure on us to deliver for the whole company. But fortunately, even though all these areas of the company have grown, for myself and my group, things haven't. We're a bit bigger for scale, but my day-to-day directing the team and directing the games hasn't changed. I do a lot of things to sort of keep it that way. I like to focus on one game at a time, but most people's jobs have remained the same. It's just when it comes to something like art or code, design, anything, it all just takes longer. Because we're able to put more detail in the art, we'll be able to do more with quests, and also the quality bar that we have keeps going up. We want to do a better job each time, and oftentimes that just takes more personal manpower time to make a quest that has all the things that you want it to have and has all the dialogue right and the scenes, and all the art has all the details, and the code itself is letting the players do even more things. So,
right. I mean, I think we talked about, in the podcast I did with you guys, obviously, our group, of which the three of us belong to on the marketing side, has grown quite a bit, percentage-wise, much more than Todd's team. obviously we've got a lot more titles to handle, and my role has shifted from being the primary caretaker of Elder Scrolls all the time, like that was the majority of what I did, to obviously still spending a lot of time in working on it and working with Todd and with you guys and everybody else on the Elder Scrolls. But
you've got
in this
everything
year, we
else.
got Brink, we got Hunted and Rage, and we just announced Prey 2, and I've been working on stuff that we're doing in 2012 that we haven't announced yet. Like there's just a lot more things to keep track of and keep up with than ever before. But I think in a good way. So I think the thing that I have noticed that I'm appreciative of is that we still have much of the same feel as we did before in terms of people, even if we've gotten larger. And I think that goes in large part to the fact that the studios that we now have internal, as Todd said, it went from just Bethesda Game Studios to id and Arcane and Machine Games and Tango. All of those guys have a very similar culture. They all fit really well with us in terms of their design philosophy, in terms of their personalities, low ego. We just want to make great games, and I think that's kind of helped us keep that same feel, even though we've gone from whatever we were on Oblivion to what we are now, which is several times larger.
Right. I think that's a nice note to end on. Well, thanks a lot for coming by, guys. I mean, to do this again
Happy
next year when it's
anniversary.
the 10-year anniversary of Morrowind next year, so we'll do it again.
Oh, wow.
And you can really stretch your memories.
Boy, talk about long time ago.
We'll have to call Pete back for that one.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks, guys.
Thanks.